We made an absolute ton of progress in the last video on the RX7. We got the engine built, we got everything back from Atkins. That engine is balanced, it's freshly cleaned, it's got all new seals, it is ready to go, it's ready to rip, and it's ready to make some power. So today we need to get cracking on focusing on getting a lot of the engine stuff that we have sitting around the shop back on the car. We still have a ton of body stuff to do on this thing. We still have paint work we need to do. It's still got a ways to go, but seeing this beautiful 13B back in that engine bay just gets my butthole all tingly and it gets me excited. It's like someone has just like sprinkled a little fairy dust and I'm just like, I'm cracking out right now. All right, I'm cracking out. So we have some stuff we need to powder coat first before we get it back on the engine, such as like the power steering bracket. Power steering pump, I'm gonna try to find a way to clean that up a bit. We've got the wastegates we gotta get on, the turbos gotta get on there permanently, some water lines on there, whole bunch of stuff. After we kind of work our way through the engine bay stuff, I'd like to maybe focus on some of the suspension because our suspension technically isn't really bolted. It's bolted on, but it's not tightened up or anything like that right now. So let's get cracking. As you may or may not have already figured out, Rotaries leak oil. It's pretty typical that they're going to leak oil from somewhere. And with this RX7 being 31 years old, every bracket, every brace, every piece that we take off is going to get Cerakoted or powder coated prior to going back onto this engine because I want everything to look brand new. And that is to include stuff like this power steering pump bracket and everything associated with it because I want to ensure that everything is going to remain clean and fresh for as long as we can. Even the small little brackets that are going to sit on top of like the trans tunnel to cover all that stuff up, I want it looking perfect. At this point we can actually go ahead and put on our lower intake manifold permanently because there isn't really any need for that thing to come back off again. So the lower intake manifold is actually Cerakoted because it sits so close to the turbo. We want that Cerakote to hold up over time from the excessive heat that turbo is going to be putting out. The Cerakote will also help reflect, or not reflect, but just kind of keep some of that heat out and help keep our IATs a little bit lower. Rotaries and heat management is a huge thing, but with that, heat management, external wastegates. So we can finally toss these things back on. There shouldn't be any reason that they need to come off again unless we're gonna be doing the lines for them. For these, I have opted to do hard lines for all of the vacuum lines in the car. I do not foresee standard silicone line or anything like that holding up long-term to the amount of heat that this thing's gonna be putting out. So we're gonna be putting on some 1/8 NPT to dash 4 fittings and making all of our own hard line for the vacuum lines. A, it's gonna look better, B, it's gonna hold up long-term without any issues. Been debating on what I want to do with the power steering pump because this is still a very good power steering pump. It's actually really small for the FD. So what we're gonna do is all of the brackets for the pump itself, we're gonna sandblast these and we're gonna powder coat these black. And then we're gonna Alumablast the power steering pump itself, where we'll just mask up the areas where we don't want to get Alumablast in it, let it dry. That'll make the power steering pump look way cleaner, and with all the brackets, that nice black that we have with everything else in the engine bay, I think it'll look really good. And while we're powder coating, I need to do a coolant pipe. I'm gonna do it in the Highland bronze because I think it'll just I think it'll mesh better in the engine bay, which it sucks to do the bronze because it takes a couple coats, but this big long water pipe is for the heater core and it goes into the engine, but I want to get that. We can't actually put the turbo in permanently until we get that in, so more powder coating. There's just a lot of cleanup, powder coating and stuff you got to do with this to make everything look nice and pretty, which is really the goal. I mean, we obviously want to have a pretty looking engine bay or a restored looking engine bay, not have a whole bunch of grungy stuff sitting in there if we can avoid it while we still make power and make a good car. So let's actually Alumablast first, because while that's curing from Alumablast, I can go ahead and sandblast those brackets and that hose and everything, and then we can just powder coat everything. We'll probably do the black first and then the bronze second. With the bronze, we have to spray the bronze on there, let it completely cool down, and then spray the clear coat on. If you're doing any type of refinishing work, I would seriously suggest at least having one can of that Illuma Blast around, because it comes in handy whenever you're trying to restore something or make something look half decent that you cannot easily take apart, or that you don't want to take apart because you might have an issue with it trying to reseal or anything like that in the future. So having a can of it sitting around really isn't bad. Now with this Highland Bronze, a lot of people are asking for this color. This is a color by Columbia Coatings. When you go to spray this, you have to spray the bronze on first, let the part completely cool down, and then we apply a clear coat over it, which gives it more of that matte bronze finish that we've been using for everything. And honestly, it looks so good in contrast to like blacks and whites and silvers. Highly suggested. I'll link it down below if you guys are looking for anything like that. The power steering pump came out beautiful. We masked around the areas that we obviously didn't want to get the Illuma Blast on, but that thing does look brand new again, with the exception of the reservoir, but I'm not going to stress that. Turbo is permanently on at this point. The drain is hooked up. It feeds right down there to the front cover. We have our coolant pipe that we just powder coated in that bronze going back up to the firewall back there. Oil feed lines in. Power steering pump is in. I gotta finish taking the tape off that thing, but it looks way better all cleaned up like that. They make new plastics for these, but they are very expensive. So while that one does look a little bit dungy, brown, and old, it's just not worth the $300 to buy a brand new one of these pumps. It's just, as much as I want to, I just don't see it being worth it. The guys over at DC Power Engineering sent over this beautiful high amp alternator. I want to say it's a 180 amp off the top of my head. I'd have to double check. But originally when they hit me up, they're like, hey, what color do you want for this? I was like, let's do polished, because at the time the turbo was polished, all the piping was polished, everything like that. Obviously we've gone away from the polished looks. It's also brought up a point with the intercooler being polished. They're like, dude, you should totally Cerakote that black. We're gonna Cerakote the intercooler black now, because it'll fit the theme of the engine bay way better. It's like the little details when it comes to building a car like this. It's the little details that you want to focus on, pay attention to make it really stand out and pop. Like anyone can just throw one of these together, but taking the actual time to make sure that everything is 100% beautiful, good looking, fits the overall theme and whatnot is really the goal here. So, didn't want to have to Cerakote more stuff, but it's whatever. It'll look good. Now, aside from this alternator just looking absolutely stunning, it's also going to help us huge in the performance department, because as we go to rev a car farther out with a stock alternator and a lot of added electronics, bigger injectors, bigger fuel pumps, things like that, you're putting a lot more demand on the alternator. And if you have a stock alternator, you'll run into things called voltage drop. We're going to drop voltage to a lot of these things, which can cause greater issues. So having an alternator that can keep up with the demand that you're putting on the car is going to be one of the best supporting mods that you can actually do. We use these things in a lot of the cars. A lot of the Subarus in the past have had these, and going forward, a lot of the cars will also be utilizing these alternators because they're such a good bang for the buck. It's actually the next day. We got our exhaust in, which I wasn't expecting to show up for a couple more days, or actually, honestly, a couple more weeks. So we ended up getting a Greddy Trust PTR exhaust, which I'll show you guys here in a minute. I had the old Tomei on the car, but I just didn't like the style of it. I didn't like how it looked on the car, so we swapped it out to a Greddy. But before we get that exhaust on, we need to get the rear diffuser on. So let's get that on there real quick. I don't quite know how I'm going to do it yet, so we'll get it figured out. The diffuser is actually not too off from where it needs to be, and I talked to a couple other Mazda people, and they said just use this diffuser because any other, even the name brand ones, are going to fit exactly the same. So we're going to get this thing worked out, figured out. There's a small gap right here that I gotta figure out how I'm gonna bolt those together and whatnot. So let me just play with this for a little while, try to get it bolted up in a way that's going to work out for us. and fit the car relatively well. And then once the rear diffuser's on, we put the exhaust on, and then we can just kind of check this off the list because our taillights show up on Wednesday, and I want to kind of wrap up the rear end of the Mazda. This diffuser I got on eBay for like $400. It's not name brand, it's definitely knockoff, and you could buy a name brand one and it might fit a little bit better, but honestly this eBay one, I would say it fits like a 7.5, 8 out of 10. It's really not bad. There's one or two small spots where it doesn't line up absolutely perfect, but you don't see those unless you're underneath of the car and unless you're looking for it specifically. So taking this thing on and off a whole bunch, finding out where I'm drilling holes, figuring out where I'm mounting it, I'm pretty happy with the end result. This is what we're looking at for it. The diffuser, I'm gonna swap all of these out for some M6x1 button head Allen, so that way it kind of flows a little bit nicer. I'll try to order some like stainless steel black ones. The Trust exhaust, dude, I love this thing. It's got like this nice little rolled tip on the end of it. Looks good, fits really well. I was a little bit worried that it wasn't necessarily going to fit up in here with this diffuser on there, and I thought I might have to trim it down, but to be honest, it fits perfect and it looks absolutely great. 10 out of 10, I'm a huge fan of that. This little resonator piece that comes up and like captures sound. I guess this is just a remove drone maybe? Not entirely sure. It'll do something, I just don't know what it'll do. I think that looks awesome. I really like that PTR exhaust from Goody right there. And with the car at ride height, the diffuser, you can't even see any like imperfections with it. You can see some of the screws, but like I said, we'll swap those to button head Allens and they'll just be stainless steel. They'll be black, so you won't really be able to see them. Our taillights show up on Wednesday, so that way we'll have the 99 spec taillights in here. I was able to find a set brand new, so I'm really excited to get those in here. We're still waiting for our hatch to show up, so that'll be a problem for later. So there's a handful of things that we still need to get done. I think I want to work on the engine harness next and get that laid out to where it's going to be going in the engine bay, start getting things plugged in. We have some powder coating that we're going to have to do for the intercooler piping and the intake. We also have to refurbish our starter to make this thing look pretty, because right now it looks pretty grungy, and a little bit of a Luma blast and some, what is it? That engine enamel I think will make that thing look brand new again. So we're gonna make all that look beautiful and look absolutely pretty. So let's start out on the easy one. Let's do the engine harness. I don't quite know how I'm gonna route it yet, so we're gonna have to figure that out, but I don't think it'll be too bad. Should be pretty straightforward. Main engine harness in. There are some modifications we are going to be making to this because I am adding some other sensors and other relays and things like that, with the addition of things like a coolant pressure sensor and some other stuff, because there are things on this ride wire harness that we are not using, such as the OMP, knock sensor, a couple things like that that just aren't going to be utilized on the setup, but it's good additions to have, so that way we can repurpose them for other sensors like coolant pressure and whatever else we want. With our engine harness pretty much tucked up at this point, there are, like I said, we're gonna clean it up here in a little bit, but for right now, I wanna jump over to the starter and get the starter in. So I'm gonna mask this thing off. We are going to paint the center section black with that engine enamel that I have, and then everything else in that Illuma Bright, just to make this thing look fresh and new again. Get it installed, and then we'll have our starter ready to go. While we were painting the starter and while it was curing, I went ahead and sandblasted all of the intercooler pipes, one coolant pipe and the intake pipe, just so that way we could get all this stuff powder coated. I feel like since we're already in the mood of powder coating everything else, let's try to powder coat as much as we can to knock out anything and everything, so that way we don't have to keep going back and forth with powder coating, because as much as I want this stuff to look beautiful, I am pretty worn out from, I'm not even worn out, I'm just pretty burnt out on powder coating, which is why I've been giving a lot of it to Ben. So Ben, if you watch this video, I appreciate you, dude. Now while the powder coat was curing in the oven, I was playing back and forth with that. We needed to swap out the lower shock body for the BC coilover, because if you guys remember a couple videos ago, I did cut out the old bushing to try to use those Power by Max front lower control arms before we found an OEM replacement. So thankfully BC sells just the lower shock body and they're pretty affordable, like 50 bucks. So got a new one ordered, got it in. Our suspension should be pretty tightened up at this point, and we should be pretty much good to go on most of that. I don't know how this happened, but I have a duck. His name's Wilmer. He's pretty chill. So I was don't stop it, Wilmer. Oh my God, he likes me. So I was working on the RX7, powder coating some stuff, and this little dude just barged into the shop. Just straight ran in here. So for the past 2 hours, I have been tending to a duck. I can't keep him. I obviously can't keep him. It'd be really cool to have a shop duck, but he would die in here, and I don't want the little dude to die. So, side note, I hear you. Don't poop on me. He pooped on me earlier. I did get all the piping powder coated. Really happy with the black. We are going to do the intercooler a nice bronze color, which I think will tie everything together real nicely. Let me put little dude down real quick, and I'll show you guys. Super happy with how all of this came out. Piping, honestly, I think was the move for black. We are gonna do the intercooler bronze. We're gonna leave the fins obviously silver, but we're gonna do the end tanks bronze and all that stuff just to get that to fit with everything else we have going on in this engine bay. I think this looks fantastic. I think it's the perfect amount of like black bronze kind of theme going on here with just a little hint of silver here and there. This is too much silver, so we're going to blend that in. I also did the lower coolant pipe in this nice bronze. I did a couple of the brackets in bronze as well, and then a couple more brackets in the black finish. But I was gonna toss more stuff on, but then we had our little duck incident over here, so I think that's where I'm gonna call it, you guys. I'm gonna go try to find a wildlife sanctuary to go drop our little friend off at, so that way he has the best chance at survival, because we have a massive heat wave coming through right now, and he's just gonna die out there, and I can't have a dead duck on my conscience, man. That's not okay. Did you poop again? Bro! You little poop machine. So that is all I've got for you guys on this one. I'm gonna jet out of here to go take care of our emergency duck situation. So with that, I hope you guys liked the video. I hope you guys liking the progress on the RX7 and how things are coming out. We made a lot of good progress in this. A lot more stuff in the engine bay is installed. A lot more stuff is powder coated and Cerakoted. We have more stuff coming back from powder coat and Cerakote from Ben here soon, so we can get more stuff on the car. In the upcoming videos, we're gonna go ahead and just get this thing knocked out. Ideally, the next 2 to 3 weeks, I would like to have the car wrapped up. We will see how far we actually get, but that is realistically the goal. So if you guys are digging the RX7 build, if you guys are digging the duck apparently, go ahead and hit that like button, turn our black, blue, green, yellow, purple, silver sign, whatever color it turns for you. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to be able to put it in one of these corners, no idea which one quite yet, but with that, I'll catch you guys in the next one. So peace out, homies.